Hello, hello, beautiful people. Mi gente bella. Welcome to another edition of Santana Says, where we talk about everything from roadblocks and relationships, everything in between, and the overall journey of life. I am excited, as always, to bring you another edition of the show and also to continue on with our series. So now we are actually doing our rounding out and doing the finale of Women's History Month, but also by the time you get this episode, we will also be in April. So this is also going to be, or like close to it, essentially. So the April is many things. So I also appreciate that not only is it AAPI, so it's Asian American Pacific Islander Month, but also that it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. So it's both, right? So I am I'm hoping we can pay homage to all of the things, but as a result, we have, the best possible guest to help us speak on that. So I am beyond excited. Y'all don't understand. It be dreams realized on the show, okay? So I am always still so grateful for all the opportunities we have, but absolutely for the person that is sitting beside me. And so if you could please give the beautiful people a chance to get to know you. Who are you? I would love for you to share.
All right. Buenas and hafade, Santiro. Ko si Professor Antoinette McDaniel, familiar Kampili, Tsungi, Tau, Bergata, Santamuning. I just said hello and welcome in my indigenous language, which is Chamorro. Chamorros are the indigenous people of the Mariana Islands, which is an archipelago in the northwestern Pacific, closer to the Philippines and Japan, so really on the other side of the world, even though I'm really excited to talk with mi Sabrina, from Puerto Rico, because we have a lot in common, a lot of parallel histories. But it is common in many indigenous cultures, as well as Guahan, where I'm from, Guam, that most people know as Guam, to introduce ourselves by saying our names, but also identifying our families and our lineages, and also the villages that we're from, so the land we're from. And I'm really especially proud to be able to offer that greeting to you, because my parents were of the generation that were punished and shamed for speaking, and most importantly, not allowed by law to learn their own language. And my grandparents, who would have been young parents at the time, were never allowed to use Chamorro in their own land under the American government. There was a naval governor who came in and burned the existing Chamorro English dictionaries. So there's a Maori scholar who talked about this component, which is they refer to as linguistic genocide. Anyhow, with all of that said, it wasn't until 2020 that I was able to finally start taking classes and to be able to offer you that introduction. So I'm really proud to do that, and I'm grateful to be here, and I adore this woman who is a genuine treasure to Cleveland and to every community that she enters. We first met at John Carroll.
We sure did.
Where you played a really significant role, but a lot of our work overlaps.
Absolutely.
And again, I'm just glad to be here.
Yay!
So happy to be there.
Oh, and I thank you so very much. I mean, for so many reasons, but it is absolutely an honor, and a true pleasure, because that is always something that I've always said so much. And so when I meet individuals that kind of bring that to the surface, bring that to fruition, I can't speak it enough. And what I mean is making sure that we acknowledge our indigenous roots at the end of the day. And I just think that what I was always saying was that one day I'm going to make sure I get back to counseling, and that if I do it, I want to do it in a way that is not colonized, and in a way that acknowledges those, and not only just your indigenous practices, but beliefs, and really other ways to really do wellness. Because if we're really going to do wellness, we need to do it like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, for me, part of the language practice, unfortunately, I think the United Nations, starting 2024, 2025, referred to it as the decade of indigenous languages, because there are thousands that by the end of the 21st century are slated for extinction. Yeah. And language is so much a part of how we understand time, how we relate to one another. For example, one of the things I find so interesting, and especially as a retired sociologist who taught writing, and really emphasized the importance of how do you make an argument and how do you write a good sentence where you can lead the the reader, not to be fancy,
Right.
but just to be clear. So you get your story across. And one of the things that in the English language, we really, in formal academic English,
Right.
we emphasize is always use the active voice
Right.
and avoid the passive voice. But it's really interesting as I continue my own hinano or journey to
Right.
learn my language. I've learned that we eschew the active voice, and it's a
Right.
way of it's a kind of humility.
Absolutely.
And it really underscores this sense of reciprocity, that you are
Right.
always part of a community.
Right.
And another one of the great gifts that I've taken away, aside from finding community across virtual community for the most part, with young people
Right.
across the diaspora in the continental United States, but also connecting onto the island, is that I learned the words for the values
Yes. Yes,
that I
yes.
did. And I remember thinking when I learned the term, I'd love to introduce this. Inafamalik, gai respetu, so obviously there's some loan words in there. Tensuli, but let's start with inafamalik.
Right.
Malik, the root word means good. And then there's all these really cool infixes. You know, when I first started learning, it's like, oh, this is going to be easy because I don't have to learn how to conjugate verbs.
Right.
We conjugate the whole frigging sentence. Yeah. Sorry, Mom, I said frigging. But it means to make good
Right.
to everyone. And I remember thinking, I may not have known that word, but
Right.
that is how I was raised.
Right.
Gai respetu, gai means to have.
Right.
So it means to have respect, but also with a great emphasis on respecting your elders.
Right.
So I as I transitioned out of academe, and also another part about Chamorro culture is that we're matrilineal.
Right.
Our origin story includes a brother and a sister,
Absolutely.
Fauna and Puntan. And the story goes something like this: that in the beginning, there was Fauna and Puntan, and Puntan, the brother, knew he was going to die, and he asked his sister Fauna to take parts of his body to make the world. So she took his eye to make the sun, his other eye to make the moon. What I love, because, you know, this is a makeup issue, his eyebrows to make
Yes.
the rainbows. I always said, good
that's
eyebrows.
cute. Exactly.
Y cejas. But I think there's this way in which, you know, learning your language and the grammar, not in a linguistic way, but in the sense of it holds all these deep meanings.
Yes.
Our relationship to time, our
right.
relationship, what we mean by guanaidza, which is love.
Yes.
And how, as I continue on my journey, and I'm really slow, because that's part of being older and also being really involved in the community here where I am settled as, and also professors said that it's like doctors, we're the worst students. You know, we turn stuff in late, you know, homework, what homework? I just want to kind of soak up the community.
Exactly.
And again, a big part of it is I just am so happy being in community, but you know, it's like as I learn more and more about how we structure sentences, it really is about, you know, it reflects this cosmology of value and reciprocity and deep respect and a sense of family that goes beyond, you know, the human beings that we are and families we are born into, but also the land, the ocean, Itasi, Itanu, all of the above. So I'm really happy and was part of starting a small one of the practicas. There have been many practicas that continue to proliferate, and we're getting people who are really, you know, who started with me and are now my teachers, and speak the language, and it's beautiful to me. So I just still stumble along, but it's like, you know what? Don't mind me. Auntie Tia is going to be here. So as I've shifted from professor. I have asked the people that I've been in conversation with to observe, you know, if we're going to do Chamorro language, let's do Chamorro culture, which is part of it. So unless you are my aunt or uncle, and that could be somebody younger than me,
Right.
or the same age, then I've requested in a very loving way. It's like, address me as Tia,
Yeah.
which is a loan word. So we add the H. So Tiha.
Okay.
Tiha.
Okay.
So Auntie Antoinette, Tiha,
Yep.
Professor, but in my culture, we have great respect for women,
Yes.
and we rely on one another.
Right.
But this sense that I'm not just the fact that these protocols. I'm not just me.
No.
Everything that I've achieved or failed to do, that groundwork was laid by my ancestors.
Right.
But also, I'd like to broaden it out.
Right.
The civil rights movement. The different histories of struggle, resistance, dignity,
Right.
beauty.
Exactly.
The Harlem Renaissance.
Right.
The Zoot Suiters.
Right.
All of the above. The Young Lords,
Oh, yes.
right?
That's right.
All the way to the Polynesian Panthers, which people should know existed.
Oh, hey. Exactly.
Hey.
Right.
Learn that because the Maori, there are different kinds of islanders, and I also
Right.
want to be very clear. I am not speaking for everyone,
Right, of
but I'm
course.
very proud to be part
Right.
of this community, and also really, really grateful for this opportunity
Right.
to at least introduce, a range of folks who
Right.
are here, who might be your neighbors,
Exactly.
who you might fall in love with, who might be your doctor or your professor.
Right.
In Northeast Ohio, I know that for many of my students,
Yeah.
I was the first, not just Chamorro or person from the Marianas, but Pacific Islander, let
Right.
alone a Pacific Islander woman in that as a scholar,
Period.
as an
Yep.
activist,
Absolutely.
as someone who was really proud and grateful to be in that space and
Right.
to be part of a conversation with my students
Exactly.
and to work with people like you.
And I know,
So-
and I'm telling you, I appreciate that more than you know, because that's what I was thinking. Like, just as you were saying all of that, one, I just everything about as you speak, period. I'm like so moved and touched, like by everything that you're saying, but also it's just the fact that because I see it as such a gift, like, and we don't always have this chance, and so I think that that's why it was so we talked about it, but this was such a project in the making, like to be able to do this because not only is it so necessary, so needed, and so like such a great reminder, but also just because as you said, it's the respect is definitely the community, but it is because we draw so much, inspiration and wisdom from our elders. And I don't know that we are appreciating that, as much as we always could, but also seeing it as the gift that it really is. And so like, we don't always have that. And there are a lot of things that unfortunately separate us and draw us away from that, especially in our society. And it's like, I love that we are shedding a literal direct light on the fact that no, it's here. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
these communities still exist and there's so much you can gain from it, so it's just like, because everything that you're saying, I'm like, I love that is the guiding principles that we should really live our lives with, so like having these simple things, and they should be simple, as you mentioned, but they have become complicated.
Yeah. And I think it's also the whole encounter as displaced people
Right.
in the diaspora,
Right.
people who, have and still continue to exist
Right.
under colonialism,
Right.
right? Because, officially Guam is still a U.S. territory. Yeah. The Chamorros of my island have never been able to exercise the right of self-determination, which the United Nations acknowledged as a
Right.
basic human right. So we've never been able to say, we Chamorros, the people who settled this land, who are descended from, and this is always a point of pride for me.
Right.
The first, according to archaeological records, the first long distance ocean going navigators in human history.
Wow.
And so a colleague of mine, Dr. Mary Therese Perez Hattori at the University of Hawaii, pointed out in a panel, in a webinar we did together, that to give you a sense of perspective,
Right.
our ancestors were navigating the open ocean,
Right.
when the Egyptians were building the pyramids.
Wow. Wow.
So I love my Polynesian, my Kanaka Maoli,
Oh, yeah, of course.
Folks, but you know what? The Micronesians, were the first for that long distance. So my name, Charfurus, just so you know, the pronunciation is Tatfurus. It's spelled Charfurus, and for all those decades in and out of the classroom, I'd always put it on the board, because anything more than 2 syllables for a lot of white folks is really intimidating.
Yes, it's a lot.
So it's I'd spell it out phonetically. C-H-A-R, like charcoal. Easy.
Right.
F-A-U-R, and then I make a joke. It's like A-U-R. It's easy to remember. It's like dinosaur, because I'm old. I'm older than you. And then O-S.
Okay.
And so the sort of westernized version that my family went with, even though I have a brother who had to, sling it a little bit different. Yeah, he got super fancy, but I always said to him, "It's your name. You can say it however you want."
Right.
But the majority of us, in my siblings and my family, we said Charfurus, and so I'd put up to help my students Char, the number 4 U.S., which was my parents' vanity plate. One of their first. But the correct pronunciation is actually Tatfurus.
Tatfurus, okay.
So their other car, they had C-H-A-T, number 4 U.S. So, but I recently learned that, and again, this is about how indigenous people, our cosmology, our aesthetics, our way of being in the world is so different from Western society.
Right.
So here's the flex. Tat, is a prefix which can be not or bad.
Right.
Falus, because we didn't have ours, I believe is linked to navigator. So it really literally could mean you're a bad navigator.
Right, exactly.
But there's this way in which there's a riff on sort of humility. So I'll give you another example. A common Chamorro name is Taitano. Tano means land. Tai means without. So Taitano means landless. But that's the opposite of what is actually true. So it's almost kind of like a who's zooming who thing. Right. Right? It's a flex. It's code switching.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's also a sign of deep humility. So I love my name because aside from my dad and my mom and all my, extended family, it means that I am possibly, or quite likely, descended from those original navigators.
Right.
And so, there's this sense of, and I think for so many, I don't want to say marginalized groups, because we're struggling, resistant, dignified, proud.
That's right.
We're all that. We're fancy. There's this way in which we navigate the world with our dignity in here, and the more we learn our history, the prouder we get.
Yep.
But at the same time, that dignity is often withheld or questioned by external forces, and as we're seeing now, is being much more blatantly erased with glee.
Right.
And bodies being disappeared. So, which I have a lot of history with. But the point is that I'm really, as a scholar, one of the common statements referring back to Newton in the scientific communities that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And at my mother's wake, I made a point of saying, not just about her, but to the elders, the manamku who were sitting with her, who were grieving with us, who were the ones, aunties and uncles, who turned out and made the food. Right. And comfort our family, as my parents did for them and theirs. It's like the shoulders of giants we stand on, I stand on. Right. Include my mom, my dad, my grandparents. Right. I had 2 grandmothers who I believe got to maybe a 3rd grade education. Although it turns out a great grandmother was an educator.
Okay. Oh, hey.
So
very cool.
It's in there on the Tatfurus side. I had a grandfather who finished 6th grade, had a good job on the island under the American government, under civil service as a plumber, but he was legally paid less than a white man doing the same job on our island, far from the continental U.S. or Turtle Island. Right. And mind you, something I really want folks to know is whenever there's saber rattling, and we haven't heard anything about North Korea lately, and the love affair that apparently happened and
Right.
is, I think it's off again now.
Right, right, probably.
But cozying up to a different dictator. But it will take only 14 minutes for a nuclear missile to take out my island, my people, my homeland. And we can talk about climate change. That's a whole other thing.
Oh, of course.
And nuclear testing.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, there is an indigenous scholar by the name of Eve Tuck, First Nations from Canada, who said we really need to create narratives, but also speaking to other scholars.
Absolutely.
That is desire-centered, not just damage-centered. As much as we experience, as much as our ancestors experience, which includes genocide in the Caribbean and the Pacific,
absolutely,
and we are their descendants, we are still here. We still need to craft it around the joy that we insist on sharing.
That's right.
And the histories that we insist on passing on, and the language that so many young people speak it so much better than I do.
Well, and they get it in creative ways.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Zines.
Yes.
This very community-based.
Right.
Let's just do this.
Yeah.
On social media, all that stuff.
Absolutely.
So I think, like, in this moment, I'm just so joyful looking at you because I know who you are, and I know what kind of mom you are. I know what kind of leader you are. I know who you hold space for, and that's why I'm really grateful to be here. And I just so am honored, appreciate the invitation.
And that's why, and it's such a cool mirror to look into, right? Because as I'm also feeling that admiration as well, right? And all of those, and all this validation and just and like you said, it's so many great not great parallels, but
strong parallels.
Exactly.
Underscore.
So pretty much, because it is so true. And I'm just and that's why there's such power in really being able to recognize that, but know that that's why we're not alone, you all, because you are exactly right with what you said. Every single thing that you brought up, I was like, wow, Puerto Rico really has, from being a U.S. territory, so they still have never experienced what independence even is, and some are unfortunately believe enough of what the United States has said to them that they don't believe that independence would actually be a great goal. That's when I know we failed.
Very similar on the island.
Yeah, exactly.
Similar conversations.
And can we blame them entirely? Because of course they're, they're consuming what they're consuming, but it's just unfortunate because it's no, we always could have. We always
did
can.
Before they got here.
You know what I'm saying? Dang. Exactly. They have just made it to where we're now dependent. So that wasn't what we should have been believing, but I get it. And I definitely agree about experiments, which, and like you said, that extends beyond many communities, period, because also we know the Tuskegee experiments on Black people. We know that in Vieques that happened in Puerto Rico. So it's just that's what we need.
Through the 1970s in LA.
Exactly.
Latinas, who were saying, if you want to be treated, you have to sign this away, not knowing that they were being they were consenting to sterilization.
Exactly. Exactly.
And this is one of the things that, as someone who has had the privilege and the pain of gaining access to Ivy League schools.
Yeah.
I also served, not humble bragging, I'm just, because there's context here.
Absolutely.
My first real job out of college, I worked for the delegate of Guam. Delegate. Important,
right. Just so
and
you know.
actually, we caucused with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus at that time.
Very cool.
This is a long time ago.
Yeah, but it's very
cool. It was
cool.
1987.
Okay. Right before I was born.
Yeah, okay. Oh, shoot. All right. You were in the twinkle somewhere. I always say, I really try to be a good elder because I really appreciate, it's an honor to be somebody's elder.
Yes.
And I always say, and again, in a Chamorro matrilineal context, my understanding is that it's this sort of social contract where we are here to guide you, protect you, comfort you when you fall down.
Yes.
Because we've fallen down, and to assure you, you'll get back up. And until then, you can come sit with me.
Right.
And I'll hold you. But I also, one of the things I updated with my own daughter that I hope and I think she's internalized, as even as an elder, there are limits.
Yeah.
No one is allowed to do whatever they want to you because they're your auntie or your uncle or
There you go.
your elder brother.
Yep.
Because sadly, some of the pathology on our island and in our communities includes, incest and domestic violence. So I draw the line there. And in fact, I was mentoring a number of really strong-willed, smart, amazing young Chamorro women in their 30s, which to me is a baby, right?
Yeah.
It's like if I'm sorry, it's my professorial background, but it's also I've been doing this for a bit. Also, it's like if I could have changed your diapers or driven you to your orthodontist appointment, that
You're right.
Anyhow, but there was a point where, because conflict, I think we also need to address that conflict
Absolutely.
exists in communities.
Yes, it does.
In beloved community.
Yeah.
So I remember there was a point in which it was a sort of really tense crisis situation, and I made it very clear to this young person who I respected. I truly respected, and I said, "Look, you're a grown person.
Absolutely.
You're a grown woman. You do not need my permission to do anything." And I was really touched because another niece spoke up and said, "Yes, but we would like your blessing." And I said, "I appreciate that, but I will always bless you. And I will always, one of the things I tell my daughter is like, up or down, win or lose, Dad and I are always on your side. Always on your side.
Right.
There's nothing you can do that we will not, I would give my life and without thought, and with the young people again. But coming back to this notion of an elder, and again, women had very high status in our families. So I think we were getting a little off track. Where were we?
Oh, yeah.
But I think that
There has been conflict in communities, though.
yeah, there is conflict in communities, and it need not. I'm fortunate.
Absolutely.
In the sense that I've been with this same man, boy from Worcester.
Okay.
We were not looking for each other.
Wow.
Not looking for each other.
Wow.
Met in San Diego. Retired military officer. Parents loved him, which is a big sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we have been together for now 40 some years.
Wow.
33 this summer, married. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's how to fight fair.
Okay.
Because there's so many times where it's like, human nature, we want our way.
We do.
I want to always be
true.
right, even if I'm wrong. I want my way,
true.
and that's human nature.
Yes.
And also, I think another part I would tell students who were learning,
Right.
especially white students, or any student who was in a privileged perspective or position. It's like, look, it's completely understandable, and in some ways, it's kind of good for you, for your ego to be hurt.
Ooh, come on now.
But you can't stay there.
No.
Right? Everybody needs it's healthy to
Yes.
want to defend yourself.
Absolutely.
But this is part of being, again, it's about kind of pulling focus and looking more broadly and understanding, which is something that we learn in our communities from the beginning. You're part of a community.
Correct.
But the point is that we can have, there's all these parts of who we are.
Right.
I'm an elder in the community. I'm a scholar that was Ivy League trained and
Right.
have the scars to show it.
Absolutely.
I am someone who was also kicked out of so many places. There are so many times. It's like, in fact, I hope I've shared this with a few people. The best I've learned through experience that the single best cure for the imposter syndrome
Yes.
is to be continually fired by mediocre white people,
Okay.
especially men. And
Ooh.
if you worked with me and
Wow.
you're a white guy, you know the ones who I'm not talking about.
Right. Absolutely.
So
It's not you.
It's not you. But there were a bunch.
You're right.
And there were white women who asserted that they're, terminal degrees. And I'm going to sound, I have such a critical view of American universities.
Right.
So I'm not trying to, but it's like, I found my way there,
Right.
writing about my community. I know the limits of those places because I just saw Obama talk about this. When you've sat with the most powerful people in the world, again, I worked in Congress.
Right.
People I'm really excited, I have to say, I met John Lewis.
Oh, hey. Okay.
He actually was looking out for me.
Wow.
Made eye contact because I was this big-eyed, wet behind the ear. It's like I'm being an adult. I'm running around and being a legislative aide. And I remember that the members, that's what we refer to them, would blatantly look me up and down. And I remember he looked at me and he had this concerned look. Right. It was very avuncular and it was very protective. So, to even be in the presence of a great man,
right.
let alone to feel that sense of compassion.
Right.
I'm not trying to name drop, but that was like a real moment. And
Absolutely.
I think, again, no matter where you're coming from, but to go back to this, I had a white colleague who basically said that they had the same training and the same depth of knowledge that I had. And it's like, I don't think you know who I am.
Correct.
I don't think you know who I am, where I come from, where I've studied, what I've struggled. And no, a terminal master's degree from an institution that is non-selective is not the experience I got.
No.
In an Ivy League school where, granted, I remember the first day I was walking down this main thoroughfare, thinking about, I was literally in my head thinking, I don't know how I got in here, but I'm going to ride this horse as far as it's going to take me.
Exactly.
But the other thing, again, coming back to community, obviously, if I had a child, they'd know it was possible. But what I thought way back then in 1988, 89 is my nieces and my nephews. And now I include that. The nieces and nephews I'm thinking about include people who may not be directly tied to my clan.
Right.
All the nieces and nephews will know this is possible.
Absolutely.
I also left there after 3 years in residence. And I tell you what, every single day there for a few months, I was always said, I'm going to the Yale bookstore and I'm going to buy a copy of The Emperor Has No Clothes.
No.
Because I'm sitting here in these seminars with these impressive professors who, to my mind, are not talking about anything important.
Right.
I actually signed up. I haven't told the story to many people. I was really excited. There was a class that was called War in the Pacific. And it was taught by an eminent historian at Yale. And it was a seminar.
Right.
And I was really excited. I was like, finally, I can,
Right.
I can dig into this. I can write about what my parents and my grandparents went through. And the first day, this pompous ass, I'm just going to say it. I don't remember his name. It's just pompous ass, Professor Pompous Ass.
Right,
Sorry,
exactly.
I don't know if you want to edit that.
No. That works. I mean, it captures it.
Said you will write, and there are all these, ambitious young white undergrads. I was the only grad student there.
Right.
But it was important to me because, I saw the titles, I'm there. I'm so there.
Absolutely.
And he made it very clear, you will write to the assigned topics. And so at some point, I raised my hand. I said, is there any flexibility around
Just curious.
that?
Yeah.
And he immediately cut me off and said, this is not a place for people who are narrow-minded. I never went back.
Oh, man.
Talk about narrow-minded.
Right. That's exactly what was being exhibited by that response.
And it's like I left. And so, but to go back to this one colleague, I still to this day, I just cannot, you know, what's the saying? To have the confidence of a mediocre white man. In this case, it's like, to have the confidence of someone who, and again, I'm not hating on the person,
Correct.
but just to have that, to be erased by someone with less education, with less at stake.
Correct.
Just, was again another slap in the face.
Exactly.
And so, navigating beyond that to get here, to continue to be now in a sort of second career where I'm doing community activism.
Right.
Got to shout out OPAL,
Yes.
the Chamorro Association of the Midwest, who I will say I'm here not representing the Chamorro Association of the Midwest.
Yes.
Although I am their director of education, but speaking my mind
Right.
with my views, which tend to be very much more to the left and much more radical and critical.
Right.
But again, based on what I've lived, but also based on the history
Absolutely.
that I've read, the evidence I've looked at,
Right.
The things people have said who had power, and the treatment, again, the fact that I'm only now, I guess I've been working on Chamorro for about 5 years, so I was 58 years old when I started learning my language, and the really sad part is my parents were gone by then. And there were moments where I could hear their voices. And I recently told to have a dream when you are learning another language,
Right.
to have a dream in a language you're learning is big. And it was sort of a lucid dream, but I remember looking to them because I talk to them every day and just saying, "Ai day, nana tintata, mana nagaigi hamsu." Mahalingsu Nuhamsu, which means, where are you? I miss you so much. And so that's really the first conversation.
Wow.
Although my parents came to Cleveland. We went up to Michigan where they were able
Right.
to watch their granddaughter, my one and only child, graduate with her BFA. And then they came back and stayed with us. And I went to San Diego and then flew them back. And then I flew my nephew out to fly back with them to San Diego to escort them because they were both in wheelchairs. My dad had a portable oxygen container. My mom had, her dementia was somewhat under control with meds, but she had dementia. And when I leaned down to kiss my mother goodbye, I don't know what came over me, but I leaned down and I said, "Hugwaitsa nana," which means I love you, Mom. And I said it really sloppily because I knew the words.
Right.
And then I went to my dad, who was also being escorted, by helpers and I leaned down and I kissed him, and this time it was a little more fluid. And I said, "Hugwaitsa tata," which means I love you, Dad. And he got choked up. And that was Cleveland. That was Cleveland Hopkins. So there's a lot of history here.
Absolutely.
For me, and, language reclamation is part of it.
Absolutely.
But I think part of why, I always say, I'm one of your worst students. I'm the slowest one. I'm just letting it kind of creep in. My Italian is better than my Chamorro, but I've lost, it's creeping up. Because for me, as long as I can, and in as many places as I can, including here, I really feel like I need to advocate for the community
Absolutely.
using the language I do speak fluently
That's right.
and the knowledge I have as a scholar, and also just to offer as an elder the love and holding space for the people who are coming up and saying, they're coming and they're amazing. And I'm, I've told so many of the nieces, primarily, and nephews I've worked with, it's like, I've been waiting for you for 30 years out here in the Midwest.
We come from an ancient line of protectors, tossing navigators, taunted defenders. Long before this colonization, our ancestors knew true liberation. Now you see it on your TV screen, flip the script on society, but they won't teach it in your history books. So listen up, Chet, Lou, Fanakunga. They bomb our islands, poison our ocean. Freedom ain't free when the land is stolen. Overfishing, illegal dumping, hills are burning and nobody is running. Don't you remember what your nana said? A die fam good, never forget. Brave fam allowing more of a legendary name.